What's going on, swim fans, and welcome to the first episode of Stroke by Stroke, where I go in and do a deep dive analysis on some of the swimming greats and share with you guys the fine details that not everyone's seeing on TV. With this summer being an Olympic summer, all eyes are going to be on the sport of swimming, and I wanted to come here to educate the masses and elevate all of our swimming knowledges on the sport that we all love so damn much. Inspired by LeBron James and JJ Redick on their Mind in the Game podcast, where they help elevate all basketball fans, I wanted to come in here and do a quick little knowledge drop on the sport of swimming and share with you guys a little bit more about what makes these titans of the sport so great at the sport of swimming. And no better first episode than to break down the two biggest competitors of all time, Ryan Lochte and Michael Phelps. So in this video, we're going to measure Ryan Lochte and Michael Phelps on 7 different categories and see who has the quick advantage in the water. These categories are going to include starts and turns, underwaters, butterfly, backstroke, breaststroke, and freestyle, and something special that I like to call the X factor. We're going to get into the specifics of what makes each of their strokes so great, what are their weaknesses, and how can you take away some of the key things that they do really well and help elevate your swimming game to the next level. So for all you swim nerds out there, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We got a whole lot more of these coming in the near future. But by now I'm sure you're probably asking yourself, who is this guy and why is he qualified to tell me about Olympic swimming technique? For all the regulars on the channel, I'm sure you probably already know, Kyle's not an Olympian. Why is he sitting up here talking to us today about swimming? I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but newsflash, it's not always the Olympians who are on the media talking about swimming. Sometimes it's the guys who just were there having a front row seat to some of the world's best swimming. Now, let me tell you about my front row seat at UC Berkeley. I had the pleasure of swimming against countless Olympians at UC Berkeley in the Cal Aquatics program, coached by Team USA's head coach, Dave Durden. Now, over the years, I got to see countless Olympians come through the program from a broad range of strokes. While I wasn't great at all 4 strokes, I had a front row seat to looking at the world's greatest. Butterfly, Tom Shields. Backstroke, Ryan Murphy. Breaststroke, Josh Prino. Freestyle, Nathan Adrian. The list goes on. I was in front of some of the world's best swimmers, so I know what good technique looks like, I know what goes into their training looks like, and I know all the little details. So I speak from experience when I'm nitpicking all these little things that you guys might not see on TV, but you're going to get it in this video. So without further ado, let's get into the first category, starts and turns. When looking at Phelps and Lochte, they're obviously world-class IMers, and with that means that they're always in lane 4 and lane 5, so they got a lot of starts right next to each other. But I couldn't really decipher who was going to be the better starter, as there's not a ton of data points out there about reaction time. Who had the better start? Fastest reaction time, Michael Phelps. Yeah, there's nothing. There's nothing out here. Neither of these guys are striking me as a Caleb Dressel or a Brad Tandy, but both of them have very solid starts. Now, I will say Phelps does kind of do the lean back before and try and anticipate the start. A lot of times these days, swimmers, officials will call you on that and will DQ you for a false start because you're moving on the start, but he's Michael Phelps, so he's not going to get called on that, right? So while I wouldn't recommend that, both of them do get in the water pretty much at the same time. Neither of them are Caleb Dressel or Brad Tandy out there. They don't have an extravagant start. So when looking at the turns, here's what we're going to look at. First off, I'm looking at fly to back. And obviously, it's kind of a toss-up here. Phelps does a really good job of coming into the wall and using all of his momentum to get into a strong backstroke leg. But when we're looking at backstroke, that's exactly where Ryan Lochte's excelling. He's one of the best in the world at backstroke underwaters, and he is an early adopter of the backstroke underwater revolution. So because of that, it's kind of a toss-up. But when looking at backstroke to breaststroke turns, Lochte's got the clear advantage to me. I personally think that Lochte does a good job of having a tight bucket turn and really holding his pullouts. Again, breaststroke is obviously a strength of Ryan Lochte's, and he holds those pullouts really long and catches a lot of speed there. Phelps, on the other hand, really tends to glide into the wall and use his height to really extend himself into that breaststroke pullout, but he doesn't do it at the speed that Ryan Lochte does, so I'm going to give the advantage there to Lochte. When looking at the back to breaststroke turns, you got to give the advantage to Ryan Lochte. They literally created a rule after him. That's right, in 2015, FINA implemented the Lochte rule, which essentially stated that you had to do all 4 strokes on the plane that stroke was in, because Ryan Lochte was doing backstroke kicks and then flipping over on freestyle. That's why he always had such a massive advantage on the backstroke to freestyle leg. He was literally doing the most because of his strength in his backstroke kicks. But when looking at freestyle turns just in general, Phelps takes the cake. His underwaters are unmatched, and I think a lot of that comes from his butterfly stroke. He has a really good job of doing a perfect amplitude on both sides of his kicks. That allows for a perfect undulation of his body. Go look at the 200 freestyle in those Beijing Olympic Games. There was no one even close to him. Phelps was leaps and bounds ahead, and he was still doing his underwaters at the end of the race. After looking at everything, though, I really couldn't pick a clear winner here. I'm going to give it as a toss-up. Both Phelps and Lochte get a point here on the starts and turns. Moving on to underwaters, something in which both of these guys were elite at, and it's becoming more and more important in the sport of swimming, especially in the short course version, to have amazing underwaters. Now, when looking at underwaters at face value, you might as well say Ryan Lochte, right? I mean, they made the underwater rule after him. Duh. Here's what I have to say, though. I think Phelps is much better at the freestyle and butterfly underwaters. Obviously, he practices both of those strokes the most often, so why shouldn't he be? But I say that because Lochte, going back to earlier, had elite breaststroke pullouts and elite backstroke underwaters. Now, don't get me wrong, Ryan Lochte was a beast on his stomach as well. In fact, I went and found footage from him in 2011, absolutely smoked Phelps on the last turn of the 200 freestyle. Granted, that was the summer that Lochte was just absolutely on fire. He went on to break the 200 IM world record. But again, going back to Phelps's 200 freestyle in Beijing, those underwaters were unparalleled. He's got a perfect amount of kicks, does a great job of executing into his breakout, doing the little freestyle kicks right before he goes into his freestyle breakout. I think what makes Phelps so special here, and something that I don't necessarily think Ryan Lochte has, is that he has the speed. Again, Phelps was always on those 4x100 freestyle relays. He's got the fast twitch underwaters. There's a reason he was on those relays. I know you guys are going to hate me for this, but I'm going to give this one another tie. Both Lochte and Phelps, you guys get a point here. It was really a toss-up at the end of the day. Kyle, you said you were going to give a definitive answer on who the best was. I know. Bear with me, guys. When you're analyzing the two best swimmers to ever do it, it's pretty difficult. There you go. I said it. These guys are the best two swimmers of all time, and it's not even close. Don't like it? Go argue with me down below in the comments section. Now, we all know Michael Phelps is the best butterfly swimmer of all time. Caleb Dressel fans, you guys are going to hate me in the comments. I already know it. All I got to say here to rebuttal your argument, Michael Phelps swam the 200 butterfly, Caleb Dressel didn't. End of story. End of story. Michael Phelps is the greatest butterflyer of all time. Now, what's interesting, though, is when I went to go analyze Michael Phelps versus Ryan Lochte in the butterfly, I always found that Ryan Lochte took out his 200 IMs almost always faster than Michael Phelps. So here's the conclusion I came to. Lochte knew that he needed to take out his 200 IMs because Phelps had such a strong back half. And let's get into why I think that Phelps is still better at butterfly, despite Ryan almost always taking out that 200 IM just a little bit faster than him in the butterfly leg. I'll give it to Ryan, though. He's got the butterfly speed. In fact, he spoiled Phelps's comeback in the 100 butterfly at the Grand Prix at Mesa in 2014. He beat Phelps one-on-one. It was not even close. But here's why I still say Phelps, though. And it's not only just because he's got the 100 and 200 in the bag. It's because of his technique. Lochte leaves his head up for a really long time in the butterfly, and I don't think he allows himself enough time to get his head back in line, causing him to rise and fall in the water a lot. While Phelps does breathe on every single stroke of the butterfly, he does it in a fashion where he's able to get his head back in line on the streamline in time, and he has a really strong kick that allows him to propel himself into that next stroke. Obviously, swim coaches always advocate for you to not breathe on every stroke, and I'm kind of a mixed bag on it. I definitely am guilty of breathing on every stroke, but again, most swimmers aren't Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps is the only one to be able to execute this breathe every stroke in a proper fashion. And again, Phelps wins here because he has those butterfly underwaters advantage over Ryan Lochte. He's got the perfect combination of power and a strong catch in the butterfly, allowing him, again, to not rise and fall as much as I think Ryan Lochte does. But again, both of these guys are world class, but I got to tip my hat This one goes to Michael Phelps. In looking at the backstroke, you guys probably don't remember Ryan Lochte's early career, but if you go back and watch some of those old highlights, you're going to realize, oh man, Ryan Lochte was a backstroke legend. He absolutely cleaned up in the college system, winning multiple NCAA titles and being an NCAA 200 backstroke record holder for the longest time. And then he went and backed it up again at the 2008 Olympics, beating legendary backstroker Aaron Pearsall, nudging him out at the end. If you guys haven't seen that already, make sure to go check out my interview. Lochte describes the entire race. It's absolutely marvelous, and he gets really emotional about it. And I just love that passion for his backstroke. In backstroke, Lochte does a really good job on his underwaters of keeping an equal amplitude on his kick. Now, most swimmers, when they're thinking of underwaters on backstroke, they really like to crank on the down kick, but they don't do enough on the up kick. Keeping an equal amplitude of these is something that Ryan Lochte does a really good job at, and he has a perfect breakout in the backstroke. Now, many say Phelps was an elite backstroker, and he was. He was one of the best at the 200 IM, so obviously he's a good backstroker. But he didn't win an Olympic gold medal in the backstroke like Ryan Lochte did. So again, I got to give the advantage to Lochte there. Both of them swam backstroke the right way though. And what the right way means is having a good rotation. A lot of times when they show those overhead footages at the Olympics from the 200 IM, it looks like both of them are crossing over, when in reality, they're not. They just have a really good rotation, so their hand placement looks a little bit off when you're doing those flyover cams. Now, let me tell you exactly where they're placing their hands, because you guys at home might not be thinking about this in your backstroke, and it might be causing you to actually overreach. When you think about backstroke, you think, I gotta be here, right? Almost 12 o'clock with my hands. Michael Phelps actually has his hands at around 11 and 1, and Lochte even a little bit wider at 10 and 2. Now, I learned late in my backstroke career that I'm actually between 9 and 3 and 10 and 2, but it's really just about preference. Obviously, if you're reaching really wide, you're going to have all this extra area that you have to sweep through, and that's wasted time and wasted space. So having your hands wider with a better rotation allows for a stronger, faster backstroke pull. If you continue to overreach, over time, it's just going to only wear on your shoulders, and this is where we see a lot of backstrokers develop shoulder injuries, so stay away from that. Overall, both Phelps and Lochte have great backstrokes, but I got to give this one to Ryan Lochte. Breaststroke was always that Achilles heel for Michael Phelps in the 200 IM, but he continually worked on it over the course of his career, and I'm going to explain how. Going back to earlier, I mentioned that Lochte had the better back to breaststroke turn, and a lot of that is due to his strong pullout and the way he's able to use his dolphin kick in his breaststroke. Again, a lot of officials these days will call you for that and DQ you, but Lochte only did it on the up kick. He never down kicked with his feet. He really just created this breaststroke kick that kind of sweeped up at the end. You'll see a lot of breaststrokers do it in the college system. Now, many might say this is because Lochte ended up having a lot of groin and knee problems later in his career, and he was trying to compensate, but I don't think that might be the case. I just think that's the way he swims breaststroke. Make sure to watch out for that the next time you're watching Ryan Lochte swim breaststroke. But when we're looking at Michael Phelps, he keeps a really flat back on his sweep through. It's really angled, and he's shooting forward with every single stroke. A lot of breaststrokers have a big tendency to pull themselves out of the water on that catch phase of their breaststroke. It's not necessary. Both of these guys kept their stroke low, and you can really see that on the side view of the 200 IM when you watch both of these guys side by side. Now, overall, I just think Lochte had a better pullout and a better breaststroke kick that helped contribute to his breaststroke speed, and for that reason, I got to take Ryan Lochte over Michael Phelps. Again, breaststroke is not a strength of mine, so if you guys want to get some more breaststroke tips and see what a world-class breaststroker looks like, make sure to go check out my breaststroke tips video. Moving on to freestyle, it was always Michael Phelps at the end of those 200 IMs trying to reel in Ryan Lochte on that last leg. And we all knew that he was more than capable of reeling Ryan Lochte in on that last leg. Why is that? Because Michael Phelps is one of the greatest freestylers of all time. Everyone knows Michael Phelps for his legendary 200 freestyle at those Beijing Olympics, but a little known fact is that Michael Phelps actually held the American record in the 100 freestyle from that 4x100 freestyle relay in Beijing, the legendary one with Jason Lezak. Well, yeah, he went 47.3 to lead that off. That was an American record, and it was fast. But moreover, the reason I say Michael Phelps is one of the greatest freestylers of all time is because of that technique displayed in that 200 freestyle. No competitor was even within sight, and it was because of his kick. I've never seen a consistent 8-beat kick throughout the course of a 200 freestyle. While both of them have what many would call a gallop stroke in the sport of swimming, Lochte just does it a little bit more. He undulates a little bit more up and down, rises and falls, whereas Phelps has that really steady kick that kind of comes in and catches him. So it's not allowing him to rise and fall that much. Really powerful. Phelps also takes a really small, narrow breath on his freestyle. After his other arm touches the water, you'll notice him quickly rotate his head. Before this other arm even gets to 50% of the next stroke, he's already done with his next breath. This is where I think he starts to excel ahead of Ryan Lochte. Ryan Lochte does look a little bit more backwards in his stroke and kind of allows his head to bring that second arm back over. When looking at head position, both of them do it really well. I personally think that Phelps has the better one. I like that he lifts his chin a little bit and he's looking about 20 degrees above vertical. And I say looking above vertical, normally you're looking down at the bottom of the black line, right? Looking about 20 degrees above that, I think that's the perfect head position for freestyle. So with that said, it's clear to me that Phelps has got to be the clear winner here for freestyle. And when it comes to the X factor, I'm sorry, Ryan. I got to give this one to Michael. Phelps is notorious for having the perfect swimming body. He's got the short legs for the fast dolphin kicks and the long torso combined with his double joints. It's unparalleled. Standing at 6'4", he's got size 14 feet. That's essentially like having fins on him. And it was said that Phelps actually had about 15% better ankle flexibility than a normal human does. But again, I think that just goes back to any swimmer has pretty good ankle flexibility. But what makes Phelps really stand out in the X Factor category is his ability to swim everything from the 100 freestyle all the way up to the 400 IM. And Phelps was also a dominant relay threat. Phelps was on all those 100 freestyle relays, the butterfly leg of all the medley relays, the 200 freestyle relays. He really could do it all, being a sprinter and a distance swimmer, all in one package. He was the quintessential, I can do everything. For this reason, I got to give the X Factor to Michael Phelps. So if you've been paying attention closely so far, you'll probably notice that after that last category, Phelps took the cake for me. And I really say that because of the broad range of strokes that he could have and his massive relay impact. Ryan Lochte is the second greatest swimmer of all time, in my opinion. He just happened to be swimming at the exact same time as the greatest swimmer of all time, Michael Phelps. Now, I know I nitpicked every little thing about their stroke, so here's 3 tips that you can put into action. Tip number 1, manage the rise and fall of your stroke. Again, Ryan Lochte and Phelps both do a great job of this, and it starts by having a strong kick. When you're doing drills in practice, especially the 2-2-2 drill, make sure to focus on how much your body rises and falls in the butterfly stroke. In butterfly, it's really important to keep your hips high, especially on that last 100 of the 200 butterfly. It's something easy to think about, so really focus on getting back into that streamline and back into that stroke. Keep the hips high and don't rise and fall. Tip number 2 is a backstroke tip, and it's make sure to rotate evenly and enter at 10 and 2. I know there's plenty of ways of doing it. I prefer that you all enter at 10 and 2. Many swimmers, when they're doing it, don't even know that they're crossing over. So a tip that I'd have and really changed my swimming career in backstroke was my coach actually went and filmed me doing what I thought was 10 and 2. He showed it to me, and I realized I was still crossing over. Thus, why I swim almost all the way out here in backstroke, what feels like 9 and 3 is actually a perfect 10 and 2 for me. So try it out with your coach at home, see how it feels. For the last and final tip, since I'm not a breaststroker, I'm going to give you a freestyle tip here, and that is to get your head back in streamline as soon as possible after the breath. Lochte does breathe a little bit backwards in his stroke, but Phelps does a really good job of getting his head in a quick breath and getting back in a streamline to ensure that he isn't rising and falling. Having a really solid kick allows both of them to snap back into that streamline position and not rise and fall as much as their competitors. Now, this stroke-by-stroke analysis was just my thoughts, but let me know if you guys think I got them wrong. Let me hear it. Comment down below who you think should have won these 7 categories. I've had Ryan Lochte on my podcast, and he was an absolute pleasure to speak with. If you haven't heard it already, make sure to go listen to it. It's a wealth of swimming knowledge. But Michael or Ryan, if you're listening to this, what did I miss? What do you guys think? And to Michael, we got to get you on the podcast, man. I would love to have you. You are my dream guest on this show. All right, swim nerds, that's going to do it for this first episode of Stroke by Stroke. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future amazing swimming tutorials, and I'll see you guys all next week.